one of America's first luxury resorts, must come down. Two massive towers wedged into a densely occupied and high-priced neighborhood. An exhausted team. A hazardous sight.
We gotta stay sharp. It's just an inherently dangerous place.
A structure built to withstand hurricane forces.
On a scale of difficulty, this would be a 12.
Packed with enough explosives to obliterate it from the Miami Beach skyline. Will it drop into the fall zone? Or send debris raining down on its million-dollar neighbors?
Fire.
Florida. Miami Beach. A haven for the rich and famous. Where big bling walks and big money talks. It's 2 minutes to implosion, and Controlled Demolition Incorporated is ready to take down these. The Sheraton Bal Harbour Beach Resorts Hotel Tower and Parking Complex. The hotel stands on the north end of the property, and a parking complex sits to the south.
Is Josh with you, or are you separate?
Together, we've got the whole parking lot locked down.
Thank you.
The team struggles with test blasts.
5 minutes. You got about 10 seconds. That's a problem. That's a big problem. This is bad.
They load the buildings with over 230 kilos of blasting power. Only 5.5 meters away from an adjacent high-rise.
Jim Santoro Stacy is hooked up and ready.
Last-minute instructions.
After you hear my detonation, count to 3 and do yours.
Final check-ins.
Stacy's in the red.
Mark is in the red.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire.
Controlled Demolition Incorporated from Phoenix, Maryland, is a veteran family demolition team. They implode outdated resort complexes on almost every continent.
As soon as we're clear, we're going to go.
From the Four Seasons Hotel in Mozambique to the Hilton Hotel in Beirut. They take on some of demolition's biggest challenges.
With anything, you know, if you have to respect it. You know, riding a horse is inherently dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. Same with explosives. If you don't respect it, you get into trouble.
Now, the team flies straight in from another job, a legendary Las Vegas hotel casino. They face another 12-hour day, their 21st in a row. A close-knit family. They have a lot on their plates, with no end in sight.
I will be very happy when these buildings are on the ground. 2 shots in 1 week is it's a lot of work. I'm tired.
The team must clear the site for a new billion-dollar condo complex. They will implode 2 separate structures at the same time. A 12-story concrete parking complex and a 17-story hotel tower. People and properties hem in the aging resort complex. The 20-story Balmoral condominium complex rises above the hotel tower to the north. To the south, beside the Sheraton's defunct parking complex, sits the swank Majestic condominiums. Busy highways and the ritzy Bal Harbour shops line the western border. On the east side of the Sheraton Resort property, vacationers and locals lounge on the waterfront's pristine beaches. The team can't just drop these structures. They must contain every gram of firepower to guarantee the buildings topple safely into predetermined areas. One fall zone is at the foot of the hotel tower. The second is at the foot of the parking complex. The last fall zone sits at the center of the property. The explosive plan looks like this. Explosives will detonate in the hotel tower's most inflexible area, its front legs. As the legs collapse, the front of the building drops. Milliseconds later, a series of explosions sweep to the back. With nothing supporting its weight, the tower tumbles toward the center of the property. But there is a major obstacle. The once glamorous lobby of the old resort stands in the hotel tower's fall zone. When the tower crashes down, the lobby could launch concrete and broken steel over the safety perimeter, damaging property or injuring people. It isn't practical to implode the lobby. So the crew chooses this to solve the dilemma: the Komatsu 400, with a specialized mechanical claw.
This is an Okada 90 concrete processor with a rebar cutter in the back. It has approximately 5,000 pounds of pressure. It pretty much would crush a car, smash it down to a pancake.
This mechanical monster has over 12 meters of reach. The Komatsu tears free the lobby's last support, and the structure collapses under its own weight. 6 excavators attack the rubble the Komatsu leaves behind. This rubble is precious. The crew recycles over 53,000 cubic meters of concrete. Excavators reclaim a jagged mass of broken steel. The price of building materials is at an all-time high. Recycling them is a billion-dollar business. Crews quickly clear the area at the base of the hotel tower. Inside the tower, the explosives team gets a look at what they're up against. Marc Loiseau is the demolition designer. He tours the building for the first time.
How did they build this here? Is this code?
Oh, I would hate to sit here and comment on that.
Once you cover it up with a little sheetrock, I guess nobody knows,
That
huh?
becomes code, right?
He has 10 days to finalize his plan to implode the structures. Touring the floors gutted by the local contractor, Mark finds a problem. A steel I-beam spans a section of the building. It's 22.8 meters long and nearly 2 meters high.
This is bad. I can't do anything with this.
Florida is hurricane country. Monsters like Andrew, Katrina, and Wilma pound her shores. Architects designed the hotel tower to withstand high winds by buttressing her walls with the huge I-beam.
That's the biggest steel beam I've ever seen other than the World Trade Center.
In a building.
That's a big beam.
Unlike concrete, steel has some flexibility to allow the building to sway slightly in hurricane-force winds.
I don't see how it looks like.
I-beams this big are normally reserved for skyscrapers. This I-beam holds the upper floors together.
I can't do anything with this.
Knock his feet out from underneath it.
If Mark executes his original strategy, here's what could happen. As the front legs of the hotel tower collapse, the I-beam will hold steady, pulling the building away from the fall zone, toward the Balmoral condos, crushing the balconies and front rooms of the first 5 floors.
I can't work at this level. This controls the whole end of the building.
Mark has a problem. His plan for the hotel tower is obsolete. How will he devise and implement a new one in only 10 days? wrecking crews break the Sheraton Bal Harbour Resort down into a mass of crumbling concrete and twisted steel to prepare it for structural implosion. Months of demolition give the neighbors plenty to complain about. They hate the cloud of grit spreading from the site, and on implosion day, they worry that the dust will affect their lungs. In 2004, another Miami Beach property was slated for demolition. When the apartment complex collapsed, it created this massive dust cloud. The neighbors don't want dust coating their condos or their lungs. They threaten a lawsuit to prevent the implosion. If they succeed, the town could shut down Mark's entire operation. The debris makes it hard to imagine the grandeur of this hotel when it opened in 1956. Built by Morris Lapidus and originally dubbed the Americana, it was one of the first of its kind, an all-inclusive resort hotel. 645 rooms housed post-war tourists eager for swank escapes. In 1963, John F. Kennedy stayed here, giving a speech only 4 days before his assassination.
The President of the United States.
Frank Sinatra and his Rat Pack held court in the hotel's infamous Carnival Supper Club. The hotel was more than a place to stay. It was the destination. A trendy holiday hotspot whose lobby permanently displayed live alligators.
Lapidus basically reinvented the modern resort hotel, and that puts this hotel in its own class.
The glamour has faded, and tourists have been replaced by demolition teams. Mark struggles with the I-beam in the hotel tower, but he must also plan the implosion of the parking complex.
This is a well-built structure. It's very, very well reinforced. It's very well executed. I respect it. Now that respect gives me pause.
This former 12-story parking complex with hotel rooms on the top levels has 3 features. The south-facing stairwell, the parking area composed of horizontal concrete waffle slabs, and an elevator shaft built high and narrow. Mark wants the waffle slabs, made of hollow concrete and steel ribbing, to slide forward into the fall zone. But he knows that each section will impact the others during the implosion. If he's not careful, the elevator shaft could fall against the waffle slab, forcing it toward the stairwell and sending the stairwell reeling backwards.
Either that back wall is ready to come, or it's going to fight. If it fights, it could go backward. If it goes backward, it's going across the majestic parking garage about 12 feet away.
To prevent property damage to the neighbors, Mark decides to treat the building like it is 3 independent pieces during the implosion sequence.
We know pretty much what the waffle slab wants to do, and we will be weakening the structure in a fashion that creates flexibility during the implosion sequence where none exists now.
Problem solved? Not quite. Now, Mark must determine the explosive power he'll need to make the structures fall properly. He investigates the support columns in the parking complex. A skid steer outfitted with a pneumatic hammer breaks away the concrete. Mark doesn't like the rebar he sees. It's unusually placed. He pulls the machine to the other side for more information.
I hate this rebar configuration. It's just twice as much
The
work.
column has rebar on only 2 of its sides.
All right. Now my problem is the explosive wants to blow out in the direction of least resistance to 2 sides.
Normally, builders position rebar at regular intervals to create a steel cage. Workers place these cages inside the columns and fill them with poured concrete. This gives the column added strength. Mark wants to make the rebar fail by bowing it outwards. They place explosives in the middle, and it bows the rebar out on all sides. Mark's problem is that the parking complex columns have rebar on only two sides. When the dynamite detonates, it will escape through the column's weak sides. It won't bend the rebar, and the building won't separate or fall properly. In the demolition business, they call it a sit-down. In 2006, another demolition team miscalculates. They do not place enough explosives into the support legs of a former NHL arena in Winnipeg, Canada. The team triggers the explosives, but the rebar does not fail. The arena remains standing. Instead of flexing and falling, it sits straight down onto its four corners. It is critical that Mark determines the combination of explosives to overcome the two-sided rebar dilemma. He decides to do a test shot. It's bright and early Wednesday morning, just 4 days before the implosion. Mark places explosives in 4 columns, 2 in the parking complex and 2 in the hotel tower.
What I'm doing now is adjusting exactly where the explosives go in the column. This hole is drilled a little deeper than it ought to be. That's a policy we have. It's better to drill it just a touch deeper. You can always stem it up. This is a primer. It's a half of a stick, which makes it a quarter of a pound of explosives. I might need some more sand.
He sets them at different depths inside the columns and in different strengths to monitor the effects. It's rush hour in Bal Harbour.
I just gotta check.
Everybody's upset.
And move my truck.
But crews are still prepping the columns for the test.
This dynamite has been the purpose of the test shot is determine exactly how much explosives we need. And it's actually preferential to undershoot a test shot just a little bit if you can. If you overshoot it, you don't learn too much.
If Mark overshoots the test blast, it'll destroy the clues he needs to bring the building down.
A test blast is probably the most dangerous thing we do because people aren't ready for it. Everybody expects a main implosion, but the test blast is a little more difficult than that. It's also the time where we know the least about the explosives that we need. That's why we do a test. So it's an important thing, but it kind of upsets everybody early in the morning.
I'll take it.
Even though it's only a few sticks of dynamite, the crew locks down the entire site.
We're still looking about 5 minutes, just waiting to shut everything down.
Police halt traffic in both directions.
All right, Mark, we got a real big backup coming.
Southbound already, so as soon as we're gonna have to expedite this a little bit.
Mark will initiate the first shots in the parking complex. Jesse will trigger the shots in the hotel tower.
Jesse, the warm-up on your machine is about 13 seconds. We'll warm up together. After you hear mine, count to 3, and then push yours. Ray, Jesse, and I are both hooked up. We're ready to start warming up.
With seconds to go, the crew spots a pedestrian on the wrong side of the security perimeter.
You got those people, Jim? They're the last people. To your left, Jim. Coming up the street.
Got him.
Okay, Jim, we're just gonna hold them right there, okay?
The site is secured.
Okay, Mark, warm them up.
Okay, Jesse, warm up.
Jesse, tell me when you're in the red.
Jesse is in the red.
Here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Fire.
1, fire. You're all set. We're all clear.
Okay, Ray, all clear, release traffic.
Already done.
I do not want anyone to cut down any cover. I want to see what it looks like after the shot before anybody touches it, please.
Mark moves in to check one of the parking complex columns. It has been a small but significant blast. He's not happy with what he sees.
Yeah, that's a problem. That's
Hey,
a
are we
big
give
problem.
PPC an okay to come in or what? Yeah, go ahead.
Mark's placement of the explosives is a failure.
Look how brittle this is.
The test shot shatters the concrete and leaves the rebar virtually untouched.
just going to blow out either side and not bend the rebar. So I've really got a problem. In this case, I wish I had more rebar rather than this configuration, but that's a 2 coffee decision. So we're going to go look at the other building and see what we find.
Mark moves over to the hotel tower. He placed the explosives at the rear of the hotel tower, in the columns nearest the Balmoral property, a place he has dubbed the hinge row. If all goes well, this row of columns will only partially shatter during the implosion sequence. It should look like this. The explosives at the front of the hotel detonate, sending the face of the tower falling forward. The hinge row detonates. The explosives weaken the wall, but it remains intact. It is dragged over, preventing debris from dropping towards the Balmoral condominiums. At the last moment, the hinge wall is torn free from its base by the weight of the wall as it falls. For a few critical moments, the hinge row bears the weight of the back half of the hotel tower. Mark needs a precise amount of dynamite, just enough to bend the hinge row columns without completely destroying them.
This is a half a stick of explosives here. The concrete is well fractured on the inside. It's spalled off. But you notice nothing is displaced. Nothing is displaced at all.
Both test shots provide critical information. Mark now knows he'll need to use more dynamite if he's going to make the hinge row flex. Within the hotel tower, Mark's brother Doug works on another piece of the implosion plan puzzle, the I-beam. The hotel tower's 6th floor is a lattice of steel beams with a massive I-beam at its center. Doug needs to find its weakness.
If you eliminate this column, essentially you're making a cantilever out of this beam.
When the support columns are removed on one side, the I-beam becomes a lever on which the upper floors push down. The I-beam will pry the opposite side of the tower up and away from the Balmoral condos.
The real key is the timing. How long do you wait to get the maximum pull from it on the rest of the building? You will see these walls actually jump in because we're using the weight, we're using the construction to control the fall of the building. It's cool. You'll like it.
Doug's plan requires that the team start loading the hotel tower with explosives. But before they can start, Mark confronts a bureaucratic hurdle.
We cannot load. Hopefully they won't get a restraining order.
The neighbors file a complaint with City Council. The town of Bal Harbour refuses to issue the implosion permit pending further investigation. Mark must decide. Should he wait to see if a stop work order is issued or load the buildings with explosives? It's only 3 days before the scheduled implosion of the Sheraton Bal Harbour Resort. 230 kilograms of explosives arrive on site, but the town of Bal Harbour is still investigating a neighbor's concerns over the demolition.
The 50 grand we got.
Mark worries about the shaped charges. Explosive devices even more powerful than dynamite. He doesn't want that kind of deadly force just sitting around, and he is legally permitted to load the buildings. Mark makes the decision to push things forward.
I'm here to take out a building, so we're loading the building. Swing it very, very slowly here.
The crew drills holes and loads dynamite to attack concrete and rebar.
What surprises me is
the hotel tower also contains steel columns. Weakening them requires something more powerful than dynamite.
If we taped a stick of dynamite to this column, all the energy would go away from it. You'd knock the rust off of it.
Doug uses linear shaped charges to combat the steel.
Due to the conical shape of this, rather than detonating to the least resistance, it directionalizes the charge. What happens is when this goes off, 2 carats of energy come together at an optimum standoff distance, and it will cut the steel as clean as a knife. These will be placed on the steel, something like this. So what happens is when it's detonated, this will cut completely through.
Warheads, armor-piercing shells, and improvised explosive devices use the same principle. The team straps 4 shaped charges on either side of the steel beam, 2 at the top and 2 at the bottom. The charges will detonate simultaneously, removing a large section of the column. As the team begins to install the shaped charges, Doug and Mark receive an emergency call.
Hola, quiero hablar con Oscar Rocha, por favor. Me llamo Marco Loazo, presidente del Controlled Demolition Incorporated in Los Estados Unidos. This is an emergency project for Pemex. It involves the plataforma, the Bay of Campeche. It is urgent that I speak with him.
CDI doesn't just bring down buildings. They perform some of the most dangerous industrial demolitions on the planet. In 2006, Israeli jets bombed Madirej Bridge in Lebanon. With one span of the bridge hanging dangerously, CDI came in to drop. At 366 meters, the Omega Tower in Argentina was the world's tallest radio tower. In 1998, CDI brought it down, the tallest structure ever felled by explosives.
The nationalized oil company in Mexico. Apparently yesterday they had an oil platform knocked over by the wind, and it floated into another platform, colliding with it, snapped off the head of an oil well, and they've got a pretty big spill, which is an environmental concern, and they want us to come down immediately.
Doug has to leave early the next morning to deal with the hulking rig. Ray Zakowski takes over the tricky shaped charge installation.
What we're doing right now is putting our kicker charge on the steel columns. The shape charges will cut the column high and low, but we also need to move the column. The column needs to get out of the way. So we got to actually just give it a little thunk. Here we're using just a half a stick. It's all we needed to displace the column so the column will fail.
The team loads 3 sets of explosives onto each steel column, 2 sets of shape charges for the top and bottom, and 1 stick of dynamite at the center.
The shape charges detonate at a higher velocity than the dynamite. So this is slow enough, it gives me time to cut the steel, then the dynamite detonates, steel is cut and just gives a little pow, just enough to knock it out of the way.
When the shaped charges detonate simultaneously, they cut the steel beam, high and low. The stick of dynamite, or kicker, explodes a fraction of a second later. The force of the blast displaces the beam left between the cuts. The column has nothing to support it. Gravity brings it down. Even with careful planning, experts find shape charges difficult to manage, sometimes with fatal consequences. Canberra, Australia, 1997. A crowd gathers.
Exclusion zone was placed around the area outside.
Another demolition team has loaded an outdated hospital with explosives. From the front, the implosion looks fine. On the water side, it's a different story. A steel girder, loaded with shaped charges, launches steel shrapnel 430 meters. steel shards puncture the water and injure 9 people.
The charges will be laid over the tragedy.
One fragment strikes and kills a 12-year-old child. Shaped charges have devastating power. Containing that power is critical, especially on this site, where the neighbors are only 5.5 meters away.
It's a copper-coated explosive. The copper gets forced through the steel, but the backing of the charge gets projected at about 25,000 feet per second. So unless we put all this protection up, we could send copper as far as 2,000 feet.
The team uses a custom-made solution to protect the public.
In order to stop that, we put a plywood box. Inside the plywood box is 3 pieces of conveyor belting. Here I actually put 5 because it's such a high-power charge. The fence and the fabric main goal is for stop the flying plywood. The plywood's main goal is to hold the belting. Actually, the copper will go through the first couple layers of belting and then it stops. It's a bulletproof vest for demolition.
Crews work all out to secure the boxes. There are only 36 hours till shot day, and over 100 deadly charges to be contained. While Ray boxes charges on the ground floor of the hotel tower, Mark decides on the final delay pattern from the 7th floor. This wall borders on the narrow alley separating the Sheraton Resort property from the Balmoral condominiums. Mark expects the I-beam will pull the wall over away from the Balmoral during the implosion. But he needs everything to come over in one piece. If it shatters, debris could rain down on the tennis courts or the parking complex below.
Install a cable for Harry tomorrow. All right.
Even worse, it could launch shards of steel or chunks of concrete into the occupied condominiums next door. Mark decides on some extra security. The team installs 15,000 kilogram tensile cable to ensure the wall comes over.
You can get it piano wire tight. You can literally make them hum.
Crews punch cables through the floors and wrap them around the concrete slabs below. They tether the cables to the elevator shaft that borders the alley.
A cord? What do you have?
They angle the cables to increase the tension and speed the fall.
If I didn't install a cable on an angle, I would have to wait for the beam over my head to come down on an angle somewhere between 30 and 40 degrees before I'd start to get a pull on the back wall, the north side of the structure, that needs to be pulled away from the Balmoral condos on the right. So this is probably the cheapest insurance we have toward walking the building away from the adjacent property safely.
These clamps bind the cables together.
The clamps we use are U.S. clamps. These are called Crosby clips. They are probably the best clamps that money can buy because the weak link in any chain or any cabling operation is what's going to yield first.
The clamps are vulnerable as they briefly support the immense weight of the hotel tower's rear wall.
Clamps are very critical, and how they're installed on the cable is critical.
Careful attention is required as the team installs 350 clamps and over 1 kilometer of cable. Mark's plan to drop the hotel tower is nearly complete. The motion created by the I-beam and the cabling should drag the wall over, but he has one last preparation. On the ground floor, this specially outfitted skid steer hammers out concrete along the foundation beside the hinge row.
We've released the building across the back and exposed all the rebar so that it can rotate freely and really keep the motion going. Literally, the building can pick up and rotate, and it'll rotate on the center bar.
Every strength of this hurricane-proof hotel tower has been subverted. Over in the parking complex, another team tackles the two-sided rebar. Mark's wife Sherry and two daughters Stacy and Devin load offset charges into the parking complex columns.
Deborah, we're doing this staggered thing. So you're doing back, middle, front.
The staggered loading helps distribute the energy evenly. It should be just enough to take out these columns. The team quickly connects a web of detonating cord between the explosives. Normally, Stacy connects the explosives from floor to floor in numerical order. She finds this parking complex a challenge because there are no divisions between levels. It's simply one long sloping ramp from the ground to the 5th floor, making it difficult for the loading team to stay oriented.
So this is the 8th slip. So let's go from here and I'll hop up and... it just jogs around so much, it's confusing.
Their location is critical. Stacy and Devin must get the timing and connection straight to ensure that the entire parking complex drops into the fall zone. Using a blueprint, they confirm the order of the explosives they're wiring.
I think. So it goes 1, 2, 3, 4. I think that's that. Yeah, I don't know what else it could be. Yeah, it is. It is. Okay, ready? Yep.
It's now less than 24 hours until shot day. The team has prepped and loaded the hotel and parking structures. Mark has finally secured an implosion permit from the city of Bal Harbour.
They're all in place, they're wired together, they're putting in the final initiation sequence at this point. This building will be ready to shoot probably in about 4.5 hours.
There's one catch.
Exactly.
The neighbors are still threatening to file a legal injunction against the implosion.
Let me get my... Can it sit here? Sure. But every day that they delay the demolition of these structures increases the risk to the public at large.
The towers are loaded and wired for implosion. A misstep from a trespasser could inadvertently detonate the explosives and bring the towers down without warning. Shot day. The two towers are chock full of explosives. Mark bets that the neighbors' legal challenges are too weak to delay the implosion. He bets right. The looming lawsuit passes.
I think he probably had his lawyer tell him that he'd pretty much gone his route because there's been no mention today about a temporary restraining order or a hearing related to same. So at this stage, we're loaded, we're wired, we're ready to go. We literally could hook things up and have it on the ground in 15 minutes.
The team is ready to put weeks of prep behind them. This is what Mark's plan looks like. The resort's hotel tower on the north side of the property will come down first. As the sequence begins, shaped charges destroy a series of vertical columns that support the I-beam's steel lattice. The supporting steel lattice dips forward, dropping the I-beam and prying the structure up and over. Charges on multiple floors sweep towards the hinge row, knocking out support columns as they go. The lightly loaded hinge row blows out, allowing the columns to bend, and the cables pull the wall over into the fall zone. Over at the parking complex on the south side, the plan will cut apart the three sections. The shear wall detonates. The front columns blast out and the elevator shaft will twist away from the building. Then delayed charges detonate, knocking out the supports of the parking area's waffle slabs. The waffle slabs begin to slide forward. The stairwell wall lands on top. This is Mark's perfect scenario. The police also have a perfect scenario. No injuries and no incidents. They have planned for over 3 weeks. and there are more than 35 officers on site for crowd control.
The number one priority today, without saying, is public safety, okay? The areas I'm very, very, very concerned with are the balconies on both buildings. Be very careful out there, okay? Please, if you see something, let us know. Last note, I think we should all be pretty much secured by 7:45, 8 o'clock, unless we have an incident.
The police disperse and take their places. CDI does the same.
First of all, we're double checking our own work, but we want to make sure, maybe a homeless person hasn't wandered in the middle of the night, gotten past security somehow. Strange things happen.
We've held up shots for a kitten in Washington, D.C., and we would do it again. We're here to take the buildings down, not end an innocent life of any description.
They check the building carefully, making sure no one has breached the safety perimeter. The team is only minutes away from detonation when the police spot a serious problem. A bystander enters the exclusion zone.
Kevin, class, can you see anybody?
A neighbor is spotted on the balconies of the condos next door.
Yeah.
We got people and the balconies. I understand we have somebody on the 4th floor balcony right now. The Majestic, do you see them?
The team loses precious time as police search for the correct balcony.
Right-hand corner, that's that Geo.
We can't see anybody from our position. They've come in off the balcony, but their door is still open, which means they could pop out at the last second. So the cops are going up to wrangle them. As soon as we get them out of the way, we shall proceed.
I'm passing that on to the police.
The police secure the bystander inside the condo. The demolition team preps their initiating boxes. Mark demonstrates the initiation sequence to a nervous local, the wife of the site manager. She'll help press the button.
I have known your lesser two-thirds for so long, and I would appreciate your help. Being as he represents the property owner here,
okay.
I'm going to hold down the charge button.
Okay.
And I'm going to put your thumb on the other button, and
right.
just to be sure, I'm going to put my thumb on top of yours.
Okay,
yeah, just to
good.
comply with the law. Hold your hand up. She's steadier than you are. We're going to do this.
Okay.
You ready? All right.
It's 60 seconds to implosion. Mark starts the all clear.
Jim, Mark Loazzo is clear.
Jim Santoro Stacy is hooked up and ready.
Will the steel lattice slide off into the fall zone, or will it tumble back towards the Balmoral? The crew is seconds away from finding out.
We're gonna go real fast.
Stacy and Devin are ready to initiate the implosion of the hotel tower.
Stacy's in the red.
Mark responds from his location near the parking complex.
Mark is in the red.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire.
Stacy initiates the first round. With a little help, Mark initiates the second round.
Good job.
The Sheraton blasts to bits. An impressive dust cloud drifts westward. steel support columns of the hotel tower detonate first on the left-hand side of the ground floor. Milliseconds later, explosives detonate on the 5th floor. The massive I-beam helps push the face of the building over, dragging the rear wall with it. On the 7th floor, the collapsing structure whips cables tight. At the back of the building, the hinge row flexes and releases, allowing the hotel tower to drop into the fall zone. This high-speed footage shows the steel blasting charges detonating on the ground, 3rd, 5th, and 8th floors. As it falls, it reveals the Balmoral condos standing behind it. They appear to be undamaged. Seconds later, the section that holds the elevator shaft in the parking complex tower detonates. The columns that hold up the face of the parking complex detonate milliseconds later. Together, dozens of small detonations work to create a collapsing corner. As the corner buckles, the stairwell is pulled over. The Sheraton is down in under 19 seconds.
That was an excellent job. Guy Fawkes Day in Florida.
It may be too soon to celebrate. Mark and the team move in to assess the success of the blowdown. During the implosion, winds coming off the water carry the dust cloud away from the condo towers.
We got pretty heavily dusted here. The wind was blowing directly at the mall.
The ritzy condo residents are spared. Cleanup crews quickly move to the shopping center.
One of the byproducts of demolition of any description is dust. And the advantage of implosion is you get the same amount of dust as you would with conventional demolition, but you get it all at one time. You get it at a time when you can prepare for it, you can turn off air intakes, protect adjacent properties against that dust. So all in all, I think we lucked out with the wind, and I think things will be back to normal pretty quickly here.
Mark's benchmark for success is a pile of rubble less than 11 meters. Any higher, and excavators can't reach the debris to clear it.
CDI, the south tower is perfect. We've got no kickback to speak of, nothing over the fence.
Excavation crews will take 6 weeks to clear the site. As Mark circumnavigates the site, everything seems okay until he hits the Balmoral property line.
You're going to keep working on for me? Thank you. You've got a site fence company. Would you go ahead and replace this? Whoever you use that you trust do really top quality work.
Implosion debris damaged a section of the Balmoral's chain link fence.
Their machine's going to go ahead and get this out. We'll have a fence company in here first thing tomorrow morning, put that fence back, and Balmoral will be 100% back where they belong. And sometime now, I got to go over and apologize to them for having to clean a new section of fence for us.
With a moment to reflect, Mark reviews his handiwork.
You see it come down, vertical failure, and then the differential velocity, and then the upper charges took it and just walked it over. You know, what amazes me is how far we got projection of debris to the south on this.
During the day's implosion, Mark redefines how close is too close. And a new space in Miami's landscape emerges for future generations to build on. A new history begins today.
Bye.